This case takes place in the USA in the year 2018. How far would you go to bury a secret too dark to face? A secret that, if exposed, would lead you straight to a prison cell. Today's case follows a man who created his own nightmare, and his solution was unthinkable, and his actions horrific. Meet Jonathan, who was born in 1985. With regard to this case, Jonathan's past is of little relevance. Those who knew him described him as a strapping, charming man with many talents. He had worked as a handyman and a mechanic, and by all accounts he performed well at work. But most of all, Jonathan, at least on the surface, was a devoted, loyal and supportive family man, or at least he was. By 2017, when Jonathan was 32, he was living in Jacksonville with his wife, Naomi, their dog and their child, and the happily married couple were planning on their second child. Naomi was part of a large family with many sisters. To her and her family, nothing mattered more than family. Naomi's sisters had children of their own, and Jonathan was a close uncle to all of them. One of the sisters, Kimberly Mobley, had 4 children. It was common for all of these 4 to spend long periods at their Auntie Naomi and Uncle John's house. Many weekends, and sometimes this was for the whole summer. And again, on the surface, Jonathan appeared to love spending time with his children too. But unfortunately, Jonathan had other sinister reasons. By late 2017, early 2018, he had started a sinister and disturbing relationship with his eldest niece. She was only 15 years old at the time. Her name was Iyanas Sawyer. Iyana was known as the family's princess. She had learned a lot from her mother and her aunties, and the generation above her were very close and had built a sisterhood. Iyana shared the same bond with her younger sister, who is known as SS. She also had 2 little brothers. She would teach her little brothers to read, write, and how to behave with respect. To them, she was a loving sister and a leader, and this attitude translated into her school life. Not only was she well liked by many of her fellow pupils, but she was also a scholarship student in elementary school, and an honor roll student in middle and high school. She had even been taking college-level courses to prepare for a degree, and she passed them with ease. This meant that she could fast-track high school and start college ahead of time. But tragically, she never got the chance. Her extracurricular activities were endless. She was practicing violin and was a keen dancer. She was destined for greatness, but a darkness loomed over her in the shape of her uncle. He had managed to groom her from within the family, and whenever he had the opportunity, he would commit SA. And he even did these despicable acts in front of her siblings. Jonathan would also regularly prey upon her little sister, but little information regarding the extent of this is not widely known. He had successfully manipulated 2 children, with one believing that he loved her. Iyana would journal her feelings towards Jonathan, capturing the ups and the downs, the manipulative love bombing and the essays. One moment he would prey upon her naivety, telling her how much he loved and cared for her. The next, he was being extremely hurtful. On the 7th of August 2018, Jonathan sent messages to Iyana, saying that he was planning on cutting all ties with her, as their encounters were too dangerous. Jonathan told Iyana that he loved her and wanted to be with her, but that they should wait until she is 18. He promised at this point he would divorce Naomi and run away with her. He even promised her 2 kids, but only after she finished college. However, Jonathan still continued his vile acts and preyed upon Iyana. And just 1 month after these messages were sent, Iyana fell pregnant. When the family discovered that she was pregnant, there were mixed emotions. She refused to disclose who the father was, but Iyana's family assured her that they would stick by her no matter what, although the family did have their suspicions, as Iyana had been preyed upon by an older man who was 20 years of age named Kamar Humphreys. Following this revelation, Jonathan was keeping her close so he could continue his manipulation and keep the fact that he was the father a secret. Jonathan would continue to meet her in private and message her over Snapchat. He began making all kinds of promises to her, telling Iyana that next time when she was pregnant in the future, he would cook for her until she couldn't eat, and that he loved her so much. Although, again, by the 22nd of August 2018, Jonathan had had his fill, and he tried to persuade Iyana to get an abortion. He even purchased some pills for her, but she refused and said that she was keeping the baby. Through her defiance, he changed his tune. He began messaging Iyana saying how much she needed to be with him all the time, 100% of the time, because of how much he was in love with her. He said, "I'm so in love with you, I'll kill you and cry," and later said, "You're stuck with me until you die." These two messages offered a disturbing glimpse into Jonathan's thoughts at the time. They hinted at his possessiveness and the dark path he was about to take. Jonathan used love as a way to keep her close, but beneath it, the fear was growing. The truth threatened to surface, and he felt his world closing in around him. Jonathan became restless. He wasn't sleeping. He was never going to run away with Iyana when she got older, and he had no intention of ruining his marriage with Naomi. By late 2018, Naomi was pregnant. The thought of his crimes being exposed pushed him to the brink. The lies, the secrets were all closing in, and to him, he only saw one way out: to remove her from his life. Jonathan wanted to make sure that she was gone forever. The 19th of December 2018 started as a normal day. Iyana and her sister had gone to high school together on the bus, but by the end of the day, her sister got on the bus alone. Iyana was nowhere to be seen. She had been picked up from school around midday by Jonathan and had taken her to his place of work, a junkyard called Ace Pick-a-Part. She had with her school bag and a second bag full of clothing. She believed that they were going to run away together, but Jonathan had a sinister plan, along with his 9mm pistol. CCTV witnessed Jonathan leave the junkyard and return. However, Iyana was concealed on the way in. He knew exactly where each camera was located. They then went to an area of the compound where there is no video surveillance. It was also incredibly loud in this area of the site, loud enough to hide screams, loud enough to hide bullets. Jonathan had chosen this day for a particular reason. The following day would be the trash collection day. Jonathan was the sole person in charge of the 40-yard industrial garbage unit collection, and he knew where the garbage went. He also knew there was a forecast of rain, meaning he could end Iyana and dispose of her body in a location where any evidence would likely be washed away. Jonathan had been threatening in the past and also abusive, but to her, he was still her lover and her uncle. He had driven her to an area and then told her to step out of his vehicle and into a red sedan. This red sedan car had already been chosen for crushing the following day. Any trace of her DNA would be wiped away. Upon entering the vehicle, Jonathan wrapped his hands around her neck. Strangulation was his first choice. He watched as the life drained from her body. But he couldn't stomach it. The intimacy of killing her with his bare hands was too much for him to bear. So he let go. Iyana was knocked out, and panic took over. He grabbed his phone and made a phone call to his brother, Joseph. Joseph would later recall his brother's voice. It was frantic, unsteady and restless. Jonathan then told his brother step by step what he had just done to Iyana. Upon hearing this description, Joseph was completely shocked and wasn't sure what to do. Jonathan ended the call with his brother. He then turned back to Iyana. He walked over, laid her on the ground, and reached for his pistol. This time, there was no hesitation. He pulled out the weapon, aimed it at her body, and fired a single shot, a bullet right into her heart. Iyana, who was only 16 years old at the time, died instantly, along with their unborn child. He then got to work with the rest of his twisted plan. The following information was uncovered by a jailhouse informant. He picked up Iyana's body and placed her in a bag, and then rolled her up in a carpet. He then scooped up all of the blood-covered soil and placed that in with her. He then used a machine to roll her body tight within the carpet, placed the carpet in a bucket which was then transported to a large dumpster. Jonathan then left work and headed to the gun range, thinking that if he shot his gun at the range, it would cover up any other shots that day. After leaving the gun range, Jonathan went home that night, and Naomi, his wife, claimed that he no longer seemed to be restless, and he slept like a baby. The following day, Jonathan woke up like nothing had happened. He went to work and climbed into a telescopic handler. He used this machine to lift the red sedan, the car that Iyana had once been inside, and moved it into an area where the cars would be crushed. He then ensured that the dumpster that Iyana had been dumped into would be removed that day, and sure enough, it was. Jonathan believed that his twisted plan had all come together. So he made a call to his brother again, and this time Joseph wanted clarity on what he had done. Jonathan said that he had already taken care of the situation. He told him that he took the young lady, sat her in his vehicle and tried to strangle her before shooting her in the heart and then discarding her body. Meanwhile, an investigation was underway. When Iyana didn't return home from school, her mother became desperately worried. The family knew that something was horribly wrong. The police reacted to the overwhelming worry and they checked the CCTV footage around the school. At 11 a.m., Iyana was seen leaving the school with 2 bags, a school bag and one more, but nobody could see where she went. The family called her, texted her, and left her numerous voice messages, but there was no response. After 2 days of searching for her, the police escalated the case from a runaway to a missing person. Iyana's mother Kimberly then began searching Iyana's room for any clues to where she could be. It's at this point that she found a strange document on her computer in the recycling bin. The document was a secret journal that Iyana kept. It's in this journal where she wrote about her love and troubles with a man who she referred to as Jose. But Kimberly was confused. Who was Jose? Kimberly asked Iyana's sister SS who Jose was, to which she hesitantly responded. She explained that this was a codename, and that Jose was really Uncle Jonathan. With this information, the police headed over to Jonathan's house. This took Naomi and Jonathan by surprise. Jonathan dismissed the accusations. He called them crazy. He said the idea that he had any romantic involvement with Iyana was ridiculous. But then, the police officers pulled out a warrant. Officers began searching the home, but Jonathan appeared to be calm. He told the police they could look around as much as they wanted to. Jonathan even played the perfect host. He began offering the officers food and drinks. But then, the officers began questioning Jonathan. The police brought up a hidden, deleted document found on Iyana's computer. They suspected the person named Jose was actually Jonathan. Jonathan and Naomi didn't seem surprised by this. They admitted that there were some rumours about him and Iyana in the past that had surfaced, and that the family had even cut them off for a while. But then, deciding the rumours weren't true, the family let them back in. So, these accusations weren't anything new. To them, the document wasn't even shocking. They dismissed it as nothing more than a girl's fantasy. However, the police weren't going to take any chances, and so Jonathan was brought in for questioning at the station. During the interviews, he stayed composed. He was calm and collected. He maintained his position of not knowing what had gone on, but deep down, he knew exactly what had happened to Iyana. At the sheriff's office, Jonathan provided a DNA sample, and a homicide detective took over the case. And it was then when the police made a breakthrough. As I mentioned earlier, Iyana had been preyed upon by an older man named Kamar Humphreys. The police were very well aware of this attack, and during their review into this case, they revisited this attack involving Kamar. When Iyana was essayed by Kamar, she was swabbed for any DNA in her sexual organs and underwear, and Kamar's DNA was present. But back then, the police also found another unidentified sample, which took the form of a yellow stain. When Jonathan's results came back, the truth surfaced. On the 7th of January 2019, the DNA found on Iyana's underwear matched Jonathan's. The police now knew he was lying about the relationship with Iyana, but they couldn't prove that he had done anything ill towards her since. Yet. Jonathan became a person of interest, but then came another break. The police received a phone call, and it came from Jonathan's own brother, Joseph, the man who he had confessed his crimes to just weeks before. Jonathan had called his brother on the 19th of December. He said he remembered hearing the panic in his brother's voice. He told the police that Jonathan was saying, "She might be pregnant, it might be mine, I have to get rid of the body," and then ended the call. Joseph told the police that Jonathan had called him later on, telling him that he had dumped her body in a dumpster, and finished the call by saying, "It's done, I can now move on, and my life won't be ruined." Joseph couldn't believe what he had heard, and he didn't want to believe it, but the weight of what he had heard stayed with him. Joseph struggled with the idea of turning in his own brother, but the gravity of the situation became too great. He knew if he didn't, it would haunt him forever. Jonathan was brought into the police station yet again. However, he denied the claims his brother was making, saying he was all twisted and bent out of shape. But the police didn't believe Jonathan. The interview closed with Jonathan being placed under arrest for sexual battery, and for now they needed more evidence to pin him for whatever happened to Iyana. And so the lead detective decided to place a wire on an inmate in the county jail and put this inmate in with Jonathan. The now undercover informant asked Jonathan what he knew about the disappearance of Iyana. Just 2 days later, the informant came forward with the recordings he thought the police requested, and he said Jonathan sang like a canary. He had told the informant the exact same story he had told his brother. Jonathan had also explained to this informant that within the year, a new housing estate would be built on top of the landfill, so absolutely every trace would soon be gone. The police were certain that these stories were the truth, but they needed more concrete evidence to charge him. They scoured the CCTV at the junkyard and they swabbed as many vehicles as they could, but they weren't finding the evidence they needed. That was until a detective noticed a large dumpster unit, and he was able to secure the site for an excavation. Overall, there was a staggering 155,000 tons of waste at the landfill, and it was around 80 feet deep. Finding her body would be like finding a needle in a haystack. It cost the authorities $1.5 million and 3 weeks to look through the trash. Vultures were circling over the site, giving them hope that if a body is in there, they would find it. A canine unit was taken to the site, but they couldn't locate Iyana's remains. But the time and effort was not in vain. After undertaking a fingertip search, the police uncovered several items which were suspected to be Iyana's. It was the exact same underwear that she owned. The police had no trace of her or a murder weapon, but all fingers were pointing towards Jonathan. So on the 18th of July 2019, the investigators sent the case to a grand jury. And this grand jury decided to charge Jonathan with first-degree murder for Iyana and their unborn child. Sadly, it took over 4 years for the case to reach trial. On the 14th of September 2024, Jonathan stood in court as the charges were read to him for the first time. The weight of his crimes were laid out before him. If found guilty, the death penalty was on the table, and the trial moved incredibly quickly. Within just 6 days of the trial, the jury heard damning testimonies. Jonathan's brother, inmate informants, and Iyana's little sister all came forward. Then came the Snapchat messages they had exchanged over the years. But what shook the courtroom most were the horrifying threats, when Jonathan once said, "I am so in love with you, I'll kill you and cry." The jury had heard enough. There was no direct evidence, no eyewitnesses to the murder, no CCTV, no obvious murder weapon, and no body. But the truth was extremely clear. In less than an hour of deliberation, Jonathan was found guilty of all charges. A death sentence was on the cards. However, for a death sentence to be applied for crimes committed before 2023, the jurors must all unanimously agree on all aggravating factors in the case. On the 25th of September 2023, Jonathan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The family was accepting of what the jury had decided. They felt a sense of relief knowing that the man convicted of killing Iyana would stay in jail for the rest of his life. The case of Iyana is unbelievably tragic. She was a girl with so much ahead of her and so much potential, but she was preyed upon by a vile human who took advantage of her trusting nature. As of right now, the body of Iyana has never been found, and her family will likely never get to lay her to rest.